Hi everyone. I'm one of the volunteers from Oklahoma Votes. I was gonna give it a little bit to see if anybody else was gonna join, so maybe a minute or two.
Okay.
Brianna, is it okay with you if I go ahead and share my screen?
Oh yeah.
Cool.
Okay, so we can go ahead and get started. So, hi everyone, I'm Brianna Sanders, and this is Registration 101 on Breakout Room 4. So just make sure you're in the right breakout room. And if you're not, you can go back to the main room, and Lauren will put you in the right room. Today, our speakers are Natalie Bayer, who is a former Civic Engagement Fellow and leader of Oklahoma Votes at the University of Oklahoma. And we also have Destinee Dixon, who is a voter mobilization and fundraising intern for Move On. And I will go ahead and turn it over to our speakers.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. How are you guys? Good. Yes. I'm a very interactive person. So like I said, thank you so much, Rihanna, for that lovely introduction. Like I said, my name is Destinee Dixon. I currently serve as a voter mobilization and fundraising intern for Move On, as well as I was a civic engagement fellow for the Collaborative Center this past year.
Hey, my name is Natalie. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a current student at OU, rising senior. Last year, I was a civic engagement fellow at the Carl Albert Center. So I had the job that Alejandra and Cameron, who you've seen throughout the day, still have. Destiny and I worked in that role last year. We were also co-chairs of Oklahoma Votes last year. So we know what we're talking about in terms of voter registration events. And right now I am working with the Alliance for Youth Organizing to establish OU's first polling location on campus, hopefully by November. So that's kind of where we're at now. We want to start by telling you a little bit about the things that we were able to achieve through our voter registration work last year, just to give you a bit of an idea of where you might be going as you start out with this kind of work. So as I said, we both served as civic engagement fellows and we were co-chairs of Oklahoma Votes. That enabled us with our team to win the Campus Compact voter registration competition last year. So basically that's a statewide competition. You may have participated in it before, but it's judged based on the size of your campus, and there are a few categories. And last year, through the really hard work of our team, we were able to win in the in-state and out-of-state registrations category. So we're really proud of that work. We also received a National Voter Registration Day event grant, which allowed us to register a whole lot of students on one day, which was really helpful in reaching our goals for that voter registration drive. We received the Run With It grant to help us fund some more of our registration activities. And finally, we received last year with our team the All-In Silver Campus designation. So that shows that we have taken steps to institutionalize civic engagement on campus, and then have shown that those actions that we've taken have led to a marked increase in the number of registered students on our campus. So we're really proud of that. Really excited to share with you how we got here. And so what you're going to get in this presentation is a lot of like the nuts and bolts of what it takes to improve civic engagement on campus, to increase those registration numbers, and then start to connect with a lot of these resources that I just mentioned. We'll start with a discussion, and I'm going to pass it off back to Destinee. She'll take it away.
Yeah, so we just want to kind of start with a discussion, see where you guys are at, and kind of like where you guys are with your voter registration. So what has been your experience with voter registration? What has and what has not worked? So anybody can go off of mute. We have a small group, and kind of start the discussion of kind of what your experiences is, or like what you're hoping to get out of this presentation.
Hi, my name is Audrey, and I'm tuning in actually from a college in upstate New York. and you guys have like really led a ton of really cool efforts. So we were super interested in tuning in. I am the co-chair as well of our nonpartisan voter registration initiative, and we are building a student coalition right now. We're having a ton of success. We know that smaller groups are better for civic engagement. We know that we're super excited for this intimacy of our campus coming back to campus this fall, because it's going to be such small spaces. But at the same time, what we're really looking for is how do we get that follow through? We have a voter registration rate around the 77% mark, which is awesome. We're super stoked, but that follow through drops. We have 37.2% of our voters are actually doing the voting. So how can we bridge that gap, but also make sure? I'm not a big fan of pledges. I think they're kind of annoying, but I don't know if there's another hack to that, and how can we instill it to be something long-term, especially when we're not going to be in contact that much this fall. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Audrey, for sharing. And thanks for tuning in from New York. I'm glad to have you here. That's definitely, I think, an issue that people get registered to vote, but then we have that follow through, right? Like, oh, they're not actually getting the polls. And I think it's going to be very interesting with 2020, how that also plays out. Does anyone else want to share? If they're so inclined to do so. You don't have to, but. Okay, so we can go to the next slide, Natalie.
Okay, so we're going to backtrack just a little bit to tell you a little bit about Oklahoma Votes, because it's going to give you more of a background for the kind of things that we're going to start discussing as we get into like voter registration 101, voter registration events, etc. So Oklahoma Votes is basically, sounds really similar to what you're talking about, Audrey. We're student-led, nonpartisan. We're sponsored by an organization on campus called the Carl Albert Congressional Research and Study Center. That's basically, it's named after Carl Albert, who was Speaker of the House and an Oklahoma native. So we do a lot of civic engagement work out of the center, as well as a lot of research and other stuff that we're not totally involved in. But it's a big organization. We're really grateful for their support. And so basically what we've tried to build through this student-led organization is a civic engagement coalition on campus. So what that means is that we're working with leadership on campus, we're working with other student groups, and we're really mobilizing the structures that exist on campus to create a culture of civic engagement that transcends just like the political science students or the students in student government. So we're really trying to reach every single student through this process. So the way we do that in practice involves a lot of registration tabling. So pretty much a few days a week, every single week, you will see one of our people registering students, staff, faculty in public spaces on campus. So like the union, the library, all campuses I think have sort of certain spaces where students pass through a lot, and that's a big part of our work. We host some other events, debate watch parties, candidate forums. We participate in the Campus Compact competition, which I already kind of explained. And then of course we are working to host the Oklahoma Voting Summit, and hopefully we'll be able to make it sort of an annual thing. So what we mean by sharing this with you is just to say that like our work looks really different in a lot of like we do a lot of different ways. We do a lot of different things in the events that we do. The events that we host have a lot of different primary functions, but something that we want to really communicate is that every event we have is a registration event, and there are ways that you can organize these events to make sure that you're maximizing your registration numbers in every way possible. So Destinee will get into that in more detail, but I'll start off with a really quick session overview. So we're going to talk about what makes a voter registration event, what makes it good, what you need, how you can increase participation, and then we're going to talk about volunteer training. So obviously you need people to work at all of these events. So we're going to go through how to host a volunteer training session. We're going to teach you voter registration form specifics that you can then give to your volunteers, do's and don'ts for voter registration work, frequently asked questions, and the voter identification form specifics kind of fit into that. We'll finish off by giving you some resources, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So an opportunity, like Audrey wanted to start a dialogue about how to increase your voting rates after your registration rates look really good. So we'll have an opportunity to kind of dialogue about that and draw on everybody else's experience. So without that, I'll pass it back off to Destinee for this next part.
Yeah, so you want to host a voter registration event, right? So Natalie kind of already talked about this, but every event that you have within your organization or however your school is what looks like is, opportunities to register students to vote. So a voter registration event can be from tabling. Here's Natalie actually doing tabling for Pride. She's part of Pride, so she was able to help our Pride in Oklahoma get registered to vote as they're getting their band instruments. We also host a national voter registration day on our campus. So National Voter Registration Day is considered a national-wide event, and it provides an opportunity to really gear up and get a lot of students registered to vote. We registered about a little over 200 students that day for our event on our campus, so it was a great way to say, hey, it's National Voter Registration Day. Let's get you registered to vote. So it brought a lot of people out and got people involved, like, hey, y'all are the people that I need to register with, right? And also the involvement fair. So at the University of Oklahoma, we have a very large involvement fair every year for new students as well as transfer students. So it's a great way to push our message of, who we are as an organization through Oklahoma Votes, but it's also a great way to register a lot of students and also explain to students, what does it look like registering here in Oklahoma, maybe compared to your home state back in Texas. So even if they didn't necessarily need a form, maybe they needed to just educate themselves on, oh, when it is time to now get registered to vote, where should I be making the decision of where I want to be registered at? And like I said, every event is a registration event. So we hosted watch parties for the primary as we were gearing up for the election earlier this year, volunteering training events. So if one of your volunteers wants to help out, but maybe they're not registered already, great way to register them. In-class presentations. So one a really cool thing, having connections with your classes, we were able to do that through political science classes as well as some other classes that we were able to go into, tell them the importance of registering to vote, telling them the numbers and statistics, especially with the census going on, and then also registering students to vote there as well. And then student organization visits. So we had the opportunity of going to a lot of student organizations this past year. And we kind of touched on that earlier, that STEM people don't register as often. It was I heard that in the last presentation. So we went to a lot of, engineering clubs and different types of groups. We actually went to the specific engineering tabling involvement fair at the beginning of the year, and that was a great way for us to register a lot of STEM students that wouldn't necessarily do so. So the next time, so how do we make this a successful event, right? So planning is huge in these things. So start as early as possible. Obviously with COVID, maybe some of these initial first meetings might be virtual, but make sure that you're planning that. So working with your facilities management, reserving your spaces. We did a lot of outside events, and, depending on how your campus is looking right now, social distancing and everything like that, maybe outside is a lot better to do something rather than inside. So make sure you're having those communications with your facility management about reserving a table, booking them, getting chairs and everything like that. It's really, really crucial to make sure that you're letting your campus know, or whoever you're working with, what type of space you need, and especially with COVID-19 going on right now. Ordering food, catering. Food makes people come out. You say you're giving someone free pizza, they're just going to come for the free pizza. You can't force them to register to vote, but when you're giving them that slice of pizza, you might be like, hey, do you want to register to vote at the same time? And kind of plugging in, as well as, answering questions for people even that might already be registered, which is really nice. But keeping it simple. We did a lot of pizza, donuts, coffee. It's just, cheap items that are easy for people to grab and go and keep going with their day after they get registered. And also making sure that your volunteers are trained, making sure they understand what it means. So set up and tear down. So making sure that you have people helping you there. We had a whole team. There's 7 of us, but at the same time, not all of us can be there at the same time. So volunteers are really crucial in making sure all these processes happen. So making sure they're signing up for shifts and training your volunteers in advance to actually know how to register students to vote. And definitely we ensure, doing that maybe a week or so prior. Giving them different opportunities. Entertainment. I'm a big entertainment gal. So decorations. So we have the big vote stickers and the vote not stickers, but we had really big vote balloons and you could see on our entire campus as you're walking down our South Oval. So a great way to be like, why are those up there, and drawing people's attention to what's going on. Music, games are also really cool. So we had people writing, why were you like, why do you vote? Why is it important to register to vote? Kind of getting engagement also as people are coming to register, and local celebrities. So we had our Mayor Bria Clark come to our National Voter Registration Day event. We've also hosted events with one of our representatives as well. So if you can engage and bring other people in, they'll also tell people. So Mayor Bria Clark actually also works on our campus. So she told her business students, hey, it's National Voter Registration Day. I'll be there. You should be there too. So
Yeah, and I would just
go ahead.
add, Destiny was a really great asset to our team last year in terms of the planning and logistics, because she was a residence hall advisor and knew everybody who worked in her residence hall. And so we were really able to leverage her connections to get equipment like tents and tables and things like that, as well as food and catering. So I would just add that, like, you know the people on your team, and you know the people on your team and where they're connected on campus. So don't be afraid to leverage those connections to make the planning process as easy as possible.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point you had, Natalie, like looking at your resources. So we specifically had a table, I forget what they're called, like the big, can't think of the word if you remember, like the tents, yeah, right? We were able to like get a free tent from one of our residence hall that I worked in, right? And they were able to provide and help with our efforts. But also, we'll talk about some funding things. That's a great way to get funding from other different groups, and like, hey, can you provide, the pizza, or do you have tables and chairs? So making sure you're not eating into your budget for something that's so important.
Yeah,
The
perfect.
next slide.
All right.
So funding and grants, so kind of like walked right into that. Like, you need obviously sometimes money to have these fun things, right? Like food costs money. Sometimes reserving spaces even costs money on campuses and other places. So making sure you're communicating what that funding looks like, as well as grants that maybe can potentially help you pay for these things. So working with your student activities or student life office, they can probably maybe provide some money there, as well as if you have like a civic engagement or political science or education department. Like I said, we are through the Carl Albert Center. So we've been blessed with the opportunity that we have, funding that's allotted for these registration events. But maybe you don't have a civic engagement center or research area, working with your political science department. They are always very helpful when we were working in these areas of how they can be a resource to us. So definitely checking with, maybe some of your departments that are really big into civic engagement for money. Our Student Government Association, they are also very helpful when it came to volunteers as well, but also looking into money resources with SGA. So if you're registered as a student organization, as we call it RSOs at OU. So if you're a registered student organization, you're able to get money through SGA. So that's a great way of looking how your student allocation fees or how your allocations work within your campus. SGA is a great first place to start out. Housing and food services. So when we bought pizza or certain coffees and things, we always worked with housing and food, and usually they're able to cut you a really nice deal, or picking up things and such. They'll be able to drop it off to you if you're on like a main part of your campus. But also looking at other places, like we used different resources, like we got our donuts from somewhere else just because we realized it was easier and cheaper to pay for donuts off campus and on, and we were able to get red, white, and blue donuts. So it was very nice. Thank you. And then also local donors, right? So there's some people that want to help your civic engagement events. They want to be a resource. So looking at maybe local potential donors. I know like at OU in Norman area, there's a lot of apartment complexes that will throw students money just if you put their koozies out, right? So looking at those types of things. But then also grant opportunities to help pay for these things. So we talked about, we did National Voter Registration Day. So even though it's also a national event, they also give money to host voter registration on National Voter Registration Day. So we got a lot. That was a tongue twister, but we got a very generous amount of money to be able to provide food, beverages, donuts, pizza on National Voter Registration Day from the actual organization itself. So definitely look into that as a resource to be able to pay for your voter registration events this next year. We also got the Rise Run With It grant. So we were able to do a lot of work around the primary because of RISE. We were able to use a lot of resources as well as give stipends to some of our Oklahoma Votes team. So that was a really great way to, thank all the hard work that our people have been doing, as well as paying for, all the tents and the stickers and all the great things that we needed as an organization to start catching people's eyes and attention on our campus. They are actually, I got an email from them, they're actually going to do a general election grant as well. So definitely go look at RISE or Run With It when it comes to general election. Usually with these grants, you have to do some type of paperwork of why your mission, but me and Natalie did a lot of the grant writing for these, and it really is the same general questions overall. So we kind of didn't have to really do a lot of additional work after we wrote one grant application. And then lastly, the K Votes Voting Summit grant. So later today, Lauren will be kind of talking about what that grant is going to look like in providing money to different organizations that are working on voter registration. So definitely be on the lookout for that. And then I'm going to head it back over to Natalie when it comes to looking at registration events must-haves.
Okay, so now that we've given you kind of an overview of what goes into planning the event, things that you should be thinking about as you're leading up to an event, this is something, what we're going to talk about next is kind of what we hope to be a really concrete resource for you in terms of like, you're going to host a voter registration event. These are the things that you have to have, and these are the things that you're going to want to have to make your event more successful and increase participation. So we'll start with must-haves. So we, at all of our voter registration events, have in-state and out-of-state forms. And I'll talk a little bit more about out-of-state forms in a minute. Basically, in-state is Oklahoma voter registration forms. The vast majority of students on our campus need those forms, no matter if they live in Oklahoma or if they're from out of state. So a lot of students like to register in Oklahoma, and we're really happy to accommodate that. So I would say the most forms that you need are forms that are going to correspond with your in-state registration processes. We also like to use a national form to register our out-of-state students, and we'll go over that in just a minute, but that's a really easy and efficient way to make sure that you're serving the whole student population, everybody that comes up to your table, instead of having to turn away those students who want to register in their home states. So you want to calculate the number of forms you have based on how many people you expect to show up. So Destinee, I think you're better at remembering these numbers off the top of your head. So we registered upwards of like 200 people at our involvement fair event. Is that correct?
Yeah, we raised, I think we actually count over, it was like over like 250 people that we raised our involvement, that we registered for involvement fair, in-state and out-of-state registration.
Yeah, so that was probably something around the lines of like 175, 200 in-state forms, and then about 50 to 75 out-of-state forms. Whereas if you're tabling on a regular basis in your union or library, you probably only need to have like 20 or 30 forms on hand, and you're probably not even going to use all of those. So just make sure before your event that you're calculating how many people you expect to show up, and make sure you're prepared, because it really sucks for people to walk up to your table and say, oh man, like I want to register you, but like my friend, the person who's working to me, just ran back to the library to print more forms and you have to wait. So we want to make it as easy and efficient as possible. And you'll find that that's kind of the name of the game in terms of voter registration on campus. And among young people, they want to do it quick and easy. And what works most of the time is to tell them that they can have it done in 2 minutes and don't have to think about it again. So that's what we're looking for. So like I said, you'll want to make sure that you have copies of the out-of-state form manual, which I'll get to in a minute. You want pens, blue or black ink. The election board, at least in Oklahoma, I'm assuming in most places, this is definitely true for the national form. So the election boards will send back the forms or not accept them if they are completed in pencil or a color of ink other than blue or black. So just make sure you have a lot of those on hand. A lot of students don't carry that around. You'll want to have clipboards, especially when it's a busy time like a passing period, or if your event is a high traffic event. You're going to have people filling out forms everywhere. So actually at one of our most successful events, we probably had 10 or 12 forms, and we were constantly circulating them because students were sitting on the ground. They were walking 10 feet away to sit on the grass to fill out their form. And so you need people and eyes on the clipboards, but you just want to make sure that the students can come up and fill it out right away and they don't have to wait. So make sure that you have enough to accommodate that. We really like to have stickers. It's a really good way. I mean, just like college students really like food, they really like stickers to put on water bottles and laptops and shirts and whatever. So just things to make it more exciting for students. And also the stickers will serve as a really great way to advertise what you're doing. So as part of our National Voter Registration Day grant, we received a bunch of stickers that we could give out to students who then wore them on their shirts for the rest of the day. And then we had students coming up later in the day that were saying, oh, I saw this sticker on someone's shirt. We struck up a conversation and now I want to register. So it's a really good way to like organically get word out about what you're doing, especially if it's like a one and done really quick event. So next year, you're going to want to have a volunteer sign-up sheet, because one of the best parts of this work is when people come up to you and say, wow, I'm so excited about this. I'm so glad you're doing it. How can I help? So in order to accommodate that and really capitalize on the energy you see at these events, you want to have a way for people to sign up, leave their phone number, email, so that your team can later contact them and ask them to volunteer at your next event or to come to a meeting or to attend, a candidate conversation or whatever. So you want to make sure that you're capitalizing on the energy that you see among students who are going to come up to you and really express interest in the work that you're doing. Other things, this might seem kind of like a no-brainer, but promotional materials for your organization or other upcoming events or initiatives. So something that we did last semester a lot was every time somebody came up to register to vote, we told them about the census, and we gave them information about how they as college students should fill it out, where they should have their residence listed, details such as that. And I think it was the fall semester, it might have been the spring, they run together, we did a vote tripling initiative. So every time somebody registered to vote, we asked them if they wanted to participate in our vote tripling initiative, which was basically if they commit to voting and get 3 other people to vote on election day, then we would be able to triple voter turnout. That's the whole strategy behind it. So every time somebody comes up and is expressing interest in registration, you want to make sure that you give them as many opportunities as possible to follow up with that interest and cultivate that excitement. So just as you want to have volunteer sign-up sheets, you want to make sure that students know what's coming up. If they want to get registered, they may want to attend the debate watch party. So you just want to make sure that you're using all of your resources, not requiring yourself to expend energy later in terms of like PR, getting out the word about events that are coming up. And this is a really good way to save your energy and be really efficient in terms of your programming. We also always have an important dates flyer or a poster or something that you can hang up or stand up on your table that lets students know that once they're registered, the next election, the next primary is such and such date. We also like to have information about where students can go to vote. So we have maps usually at our tables that show, if you're a student who lives in X residence hall, then we can tell you right then and there that on election day, you're going to go across the street to X church to cast your ballot. So that's really important. Those important dates also include deadlines to send in your absentee ballot, deadlines to register for your absentee ballot. What we really try to do is register students, but also be a really great resource. So we want to be like a one-stop shop for getting further involved in civic engagement and then following up on the registration that you've just completed. So you're registered, we want to be able to tell them what happens next and what their next steps should be in order to really make sure that that registration means something, that when it comes down to it, they have everything that they need to exercise their right to vote on election day. And finally, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, just making sure having all these resources is just super important, like from the forms to promotional materials. You can be able to do a lot at your voter registration tables. And just making sure that you have enough of those. It's just super important to be self-aware when you're hosting events. It's not just about pins and the forms. It's about just the whole setup and presentation to it.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And we'll get to that a little bit more on the next slide when we talk about things that make it more exciting for people to participate. But the last thing here is just, we usually have a laptop or an iPad or a phone, somebody that's in charge of pulling up the state voter database or vote.org to just make sure that students aren't already registered. We have a lot of students from Texas who are like, I don't know if I'm registered, and Texas has motor voter laws, so we're able to really quickly look that up and say, yeah, you registered when you renewed your driver's license or something like that. So that's a really good resource to have, and usually if you have one person doing that job, that's perfect. So next is Destinee was kind of hinting at making this really intentional and thinking about your event, not just as papers and forms, but as something really exciting that's going to cultivate further engagement. We already talked about food. So this is just a list of things that we found, like Destinee said, to be really successful, really cheap. Students want them, and it's really something that you can plan on in terms of your budgeting for like the rest of the year. So if you know that you're gonna have this event, you're gonna have X number of boxes of pizza, like it's so easy to just have that every time and to minimize the workload that you're putting on your team. So we like to have donuts or coffee for the morning, and then usually we'll just exchange that for pizza and fruit. Cold water works really well, especially in the September. Is September National Voter Registration Day? I think it is.
Yes. I think so.
Yeah, so it's Oklahoma. It's still really hot in September, so have cold water. So obviously you can't like give students food in exchange for registering to vote, but if they're walking by and they see you have pizza, they're way more likely to walk by your table, even if they don't know what you're doing. The next thing is music. That's super fun. Decorations. Destinee mentioned our big vote balloons, which we loved. Games. So we purchased a trivia wheel out of our budget so students could spin the wheel, answer a trivia question about voting or civic engagement, meant to be informative, but also get like a little prize afterward. Just another way to increase engagement. And then we really like doing a why do I vote board. So generally this is like a big like easel thing. How would you describe it, Destinee? It's like a notepad of sorts. It's just like really big, like post-it.
Yeah, it's like the elementary big, really notepad stickies that you can get probably from like Walmart or any, like a office supply store. And then we used to put those up and position them. And then we used to use sticky notes to get students and then write on them. So a really cheap and easy way to have like some small engagement. And then like we would write on the top of the big notepad, you know, why do you believe it's important to register a vote, or, you know, yeah, what does civic engagement mean to you? So just like a cool way, because usually sometimes when, you know, students are walking around campus, they're just hanging out, right? So they have a little more time than maybe a student that is going in between class to class.
Yeah, perfect. Like Destinee said earlier, local celebrities, selected officials, the mayor, your student body president, anybody who you think is going to get students excited about seeing that person, is going to get students to be interested in what's going on across campus or something, is a really great idea. And that's really going to depend on where you are and what kind of people you have around you. But again, just like the theme of like using your resources, using your connections. So Representative Bell, who spoke earlier today, is a really great resource for us. She loves to show up to our events, and people want to talk to her because she represents them in the legislature. So that's a really good opportunity. And then finally, volunteers from across campus. And this is part of our coalition building efforts. So we want to make sure that students are engaging from all corners of campus, but we also want to leverage the connections that we have in other student organizations. So a student spoke earlier on a panel who was a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. They have a really big voter engagement pillar of their fraternity. So the chapter, OU's chapter, was really instrumental in helping us pull off these events. So just know the students around you, know that the great work that they're doing. Alejandra, who spoke earlier, led OU's chapter of Voto Latino, and they were also really awesome in helping us, showing up at our events to help register, funneling volunteers through us. So just like always make sure that you're focusing on ways that you can collaborate and kind of spread this work out, because it's not only going to make it easier on you and your team, it's also going to bring in more people to the process, and that's ultimately what we want.
Kind of shifting gears and, you know, recognizing the current climate that we live in, like obviously, you know, the things that we did 6 months ago are going to be very different based on what we're doing right now and based on what your campus looks like right now. But what are your worries? I kind of just want to open up a conversation and discussion. What are your worries and concerns with voter registration due to currently, you know, COVID-19? And anybody can go off mute and speak about it. Come on, I know somebody has some worries and concerns. I'm worried about COVID-19 and all aspects.
I'm super worried about all the vote by mail voters whose ballots aren't going to be counted. And I know that we can track them in so many places, but I don't even know where to begin with. Like, I'm really appreciating this for like the information about training your team really well so that they know what they're doing and making sure that everyone who's filling out these forms can do it perfectly to the Board of Elections liking so that it gets counted. But even then, like, those percentages are so high. Our school has a ton of out-of-state voters, everywhere from like Hawaii to Maine. So they're traveling a long distance, and USPS is just in such brambles right now. I don't know how this is going to work out.
Yeah, I think those are really good concerns. And we're actually, the next thing Natalie's going to talk about is training your volunteers after this. So definitely some good resources here. But like being from a school that, you know, has a lot of students from a lot of different places, you know, using that national voter registration form is going to be crucial to, you know, getting these people to vote and knowing, you know, exactly what state needs what, right? Because, you know, using the national voter registration form is great because it's one form, but at the same time, you have to know, you know, are you required to put your race in Hawaii compared to, maybe Oklahoma? So making sure and understanding, what that looks like in terms of, what we're currently dealing with the COVID-19 and making sure that we're getting everybody registered in time, especially if we're in the United States Postal Service. So thank you for sharing that. Does anybody else have any worries or concerns that they want to talk about due to COVID-19 if it comes to, how to host events right now or anything of the sorts? No, yes, maybe? Okay, you can go next, Lily.
Cool.
So on to that, kind of talking about like virtual voter registration. So online voter registration, Oklahoma's not a state that has online voter registration initially, sadly. So already registered participants can update their online address and party affiliation. I actually did this the other day. So you can go on there and update it if you're like moving from, within the same county to just a new location. So if you're going from maybe Norman to Norman, somewhere of the sorts, just thinking Norman as OU kid, or, if you're going from Democrat to Republican, you can make those changes on the online form. However, first-time registration must be mailed in. That is a requirement by the state. Some states have different requirements. I don't know particularly New York's, but just making sure you understand that voter registration, especially here in the state of Oklahoma, you have to get that mail-in ballot. Virtual online registration parties, those are a really great idea to, if you can't really have events on campus, but you're still trying to get students registered to vote, have a Zoom party and you're like, here's the link to fill out the form, print it out. Let's go step by step, how you go fill out the lines, right? So something that you would do is like registering people maybe in person. You can change that into a virtual party of helping students and ensuring that they're still getting registered to vote if your campus is going to be online this semester. Also absentee ballots. Get in early as possible. So it's super, super crucial with absentee ballots. A lot of people are going to be using absentee ballots probably this year, right? Or doing vote by mail or some sort of thing. So making sure that we are getting those in very early and checking deadlines, just because even some people might meet the deadline of the absentee ballot of it being postmarked by a certain date. But because they got so many on that day, they never actually ended up getting their absentee ballot actually mailed back to them, right? Like they never actually got the official paperwork to vote by mail. So ensuring that you're doing things early so you're not put in that chaos of, not getting your information, of getting your ballot. So making sure you're checking those deadlines and you're trying to get in as early as possible are really, really crucial probably to this new virtual reality as well as due to COVID-19 if you aren't on campus this semester.
So now we're going to jump into the volunteer training part. As Destinee sort of alluded to, it's so important to make sure that these forms are completed because our deadline is really stretched out this year. We really want to make sure we get in those forms really early. So this is super essential. So your volunteers should be trained before the day of your event. What happens if they aren't trained is that people are coming up to your table trying to register to vote, and you're trying to simultaneously inform your volunteers about how to best do that, as well as serve the students that are coming up to your table. So that means that more students are going to be waiting in lines. More students are just going to be walking by because they see it's really crowded and they probably can't get it done before they have to go to class. So you want to make sure that your volunteers are trained for efficiency, and you also want to make sure that they're trained because, like we said, it really makes it more difficult. It stretches out the process if that form isn't completed correctly. You might have to track down that student on campus to fill out another form. You may have to wait till that form is rejected from the county election board and sent back to you. At that point, it may be too late. So it's a really big Pandora's box of issues if you don't have your volunteers that are trained. So something we really found has been a really great practice is setting up a volunteer training session ahead of your event. So this is like a couple weeks before. You'll want to advertise this and set it up so that you have a space reserved, food if you can do it, and then prepare with a presentation as well as practice forms. So this is going to be a time when your volunteers, the people who have expressed a real interest in the work that you're doing, can come and learn how to help. So they'll come and eat snacks and network with you, and then you can teach them based on your collective knowledge, your team's knowledge, how to effectively and efficiently fill out the forms. So you want to be good stewards of their time and get them excited. We're all really busy, but like something that we value the most in our voter registration work on campus are the volunteers that come and want to help us do it. So we just want to make sure that they feel appreciated. And one of the best ways you can do that is making sure that they feel really well equipped to do the work, that they're not overwhelmed, and that they feel like they have all the resources that they need to pull it off. So you want to publicize this event widely and early, and then at the close of your event, you want to give volunteers an opportunity to sign up to put their new skills in practice. So you'll teach them how to do the registration forms, and then you'll give them the opportunity to sign up for registering voters at your next debate watch party or your National Voter Registration Day event or something like that. So you want to make this, this would ideally be a requirement for a day of participation. So if a volunteer signs up and they haven't yet completed a volunteer training, usually we would recommend that you turn them away. So we realize that's not always possible, especially at these really early in the year events, involvement fairs and things. So sometimes it's a little bit unavoidable that you have some untrained volunteers just because you need people to be there to greet students who are trying to register. But ideally, you would have everyone really well trained, really well equipped before you even begin those events.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's also helpful too to have maybe one or two of them, just to be able to give different time options and days to people, because obviously like sometimes don't work for others.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So we mentioned have your in-state and out-of-state forms available whenever you have your events. And so we want to make sure that volunteers are also trained to use these forms as well. So some reminders for our Oklahoma people, use pen, blue or black. You want to fill out both address lines. Here, I'm just going to switch over to the forms really quick. So on the left, you see our Oklahoma form. Can you see my mouse, Destiny?
Yes, you can see.
Okay.
Yeah, you can see yours.
Perfect. So when you're working with this Oklahoma form on the left, you want to make sure that they copy the address in these lines. So usually their mailing address is not different from their street address. We just want to make sure that there's no room for error here and copy them both. You want to make sure that you ask them to pay attention to these citizenship questions. Are you a citizen? And then will you be 18 years of age on or before election day? Students tend to look those over and forget to fill them out. And then that's a situation where you have to make sure that like you can track them down on campus or find them in some way to finish that form. You also want to make sure that they read this as box 7 is county instead of country of residence. A lot of students make those errors. So these are things that your volunteers know before the events. This is time that you can save, and it's time that you can save like while you're registering students and time you can save on the back end having to make corrections. Also always sign in date at the bottom. And then if your volunteers know all this information, know all these frequent errors, they can give them a really quick glance. They can give the forms over a really quick glance in the moment, and then save you a lot of work down the line. There are also some important reminders on the right. You see the national form, which we've linked in our resources folder for this conference. This is really awesome for registering any student, no matter what state they're from. Some reminders from this form include these citizenship and age questions as well. And then you're going to want to make sure that your volunteers know how to up the requirements for each state. So while this is kind of a universal form that you can use to register students from any state, there are some different instructions. So for example, some states will require people who register to choose a party, whereas others won't. Others will require you to choose to indicate your race or ethnic group, other states won't. And then finally, they'll have different requirements for what you can use as a valid ID. So I think all will accept Social Security, some don't accept. Destiny, I just wanna make sure I'm not saying anything that's not correct. Some don't accept voter ID that is not a driver license.
Yeah, it depends on the state. So like in the state of Oklahoma, like we can Native American students can use their Native cards and IDs. We can use our student ID cards, but making sure that you can have. That depends on the state. So I think it's just really big that you look at the ID that you're using, or like looking at the rules and regulations of that.
And then
so let me jump in real quick about that. So in Oklahoma, to register to vote, you can only use your Oklahoma state driver's license or the last 4 of your social. The other IDs that you were talking about are if you go to the polls, you can use that as a voter like ID. And then in terms of other states with voter ID, most states are that state driver's license or the last four of your social. Some states require the full social security number. And so you just want to make sure that there's a guide in the voter registration form on how each state requires this form to be filled.
Yeah, so if you're wondering how the heck am I going to keep up with all this information, the answer is we have the document prepared for you in our resources folder as well, and it looks like this. So if you were, for example, going to have a student who wanted to use the national form to register to vote in Texas, you have these, we have this guide that you can print off, bring copies to your voter registration event, bring copies whenever you aim to register voters at your other events. So if somebody said, I am from Austin, Texas, I want to register at my home, you know, based on this form, that they must provide their driver's license number to register to vote. And if they don't, this is what they should do. You know that they do not have to register with a party, and you know that they need to leave the race or ethnic group position blank. That's different for every single state, but if your volunteer knows how to understand this, copies of it at your table, you can register anyone from any state, and that's going to be really helpful to make sure that everyone on your campus has the opportunity to exercise their right to vote, regardless of how far away from home they are, and regardless of what your campus looks like in terms of in-state, out-of-state composition. So that's a really awesome resource and something that's really going to streamline voter registration. If you've been trying to gather like common other state forms and try to juggle those, just training your volunteers to use this packet, which you can print out, and the national form, which I just showed you, is really going to make that process a lot more efficient.
I think just to echo and emphasize, it's super, super important to not assume what a state does or what their registration looks like, or always checking and making sure, do I need to put the party, choosing the party, do I need to leave race and ethnicity blank? Just not assuming those things of Texas is like this, so Oklahoma has to be like that too, does not mean that. So just making sure you're triple checking, especially when you're doing those national forms. So going to the next slide, doing some do's and don'ts for volunteers, making sure do's, engaging people as they pass by. I'm super hey, have you registered to vote yet? Right? So you might get some awkward, no, yes. But it's, sometimes those people are oh, no, I haven't, and will still come up to you and get registered to vote. Being friendly, encouraging voter registration, be helpful, answering questions. Biggest thing, remaining nonpartisan. Voter registration is a nonpartisan effort. So making sure that you're staying nonpartisan is super, super crucial. So going into the don'ts, do not wear a certain candidate or party affiliation as you're registering people to vote. You might really be big. The 2020 election is up. You're rooting for a particular candidate. Just don't wear it. Don't not right now. That's not the time and place. Maybe just wear a vote shirt, or maybe just wear your campus colors, right, or something of the sorts. But staying nonpartisan is super big and important. And the next one is trying to force someone to register to a particular party. So that obviously those are big no-nos. Oh, you should click that one. Nope. You let them do that. Now, some people might ask you questions about oh, if I register this way, can I vote this way? People don't understand the primaries depending on the state. They explain to those people if you're registering with this party, you can vote independent, doing vice versa, or you can, if you register this party, you can't do this or vote this way in a primary. So just educating people is a good way, but don't tell somebody this is the way or what this is the party they should put. And then also provide anything of value for registering to vote. So like you said, we talked about pizza, right, and food and donuts. You can't be oh, they're oh, can I have a slice of pizza? Well, you have to register to vote first. You can't do that, right? That's no. So, you're yeah, you want a piece of pizza? Do you want to register to vote too? No, I'm good. All right, thanks. Have a good day. Here's a sticker, right? So just making sure you're looking at these do's and don'ts, especially when you have a lot of volunteers that are working, really, really crucial to emphasize those. So some frequently asked questions that you might be thinking about, or your volunteers might be thinking about, and things that you can know. So can you register at my on-campus resident hall address? Yes, you can. I was registered in mine all 4 years in Norman. So you just got to know the address, your room number. You have to know your room number. It's super crucial. So we used to help a lot of students when we had our laptop. We wouldn't be also looking if they registered to vote already. We would also be helping them with the address of what dorm they lived in. So definitely they can register to vote the resident hall. And it's really, really a cool way to do that. If you're really easy to walk over to the church and go register to vote for 4 years. So yeah. If I'm registered to vote back home, can I register here too? You can't register 2 places, so you have to pick and choose. Pick one, not pick and choose, but pick one of where you want to register to vote at. If that's back home in Texas, or if that's here in Oklahoma. Do I need to bring my voter ID to vote? You do not need to use your voter registration ID in Oklahoma. I have mine, awkwardly enough, but all you need is a form of identification that I was talking about earlier to the polling location. If I recently changed party, address, or name, how can I update my voter registration? Kind of talked about this a little earlier. You can go online on Oklahoma for the Oklahoma voter portal. You can go on there and go change your party affiliation or name or address. So I actually just changed mine because now I don't live in Norman anymore. And then how does the absentee ballot process work? So you have to request an absentee ballot before the deadline, and then you'll receive the absentee ballot, and then you can fill it out, answer all the questions, vote, and then you actually need to get that notarized. So to the next one, after you get that notarized, you can then mail it and send it off and over. And making sure that you get it in and postmarked before that deadline is super important as well. And then where can you get that absentee ballot notarized at? It kind of depends on your location area, but you can go to UPS. You can also go to banks. So looking at public notaries, depending, sometimes campuses have notaries. So looking and seeing where those notaries are at is really crucial for getting the notarized. I know we were getting a notary put in the Carl Albert Center at some point. I don't know if that actually happened, but seeing if your campus has that notary is great. I remember sometimes we said, oh, we have a notary in the union, and then actually that notary wasn't in the union. So making sure you're providing accurate information to folks as they're trying to get their ballots notarized, especially in absentee.
Yeah, and then just a disclaimer about this slide, like we all know that all of this is changing really fast. So like absentee voting laws in Oklahoma are changing, it seems like every month. So just make sure that you are the person who has a finger on what's going on in terms of like what Supreme Court decision has said or what the legislature has now passed. So just make sure that you are equipping, that you are informed about what's going on currently with absentee process in light of the COVID pandemic, and then make sure that your volunteers know the answers to some of those questions as well, because this is really a fluid process, especially in 2020.
Yeah, you can go to the next one. So voter identification cards. So you should receive your voter ID in the mail 2 to 3 weeks after you register to vote. I like to say this: if somebody says they did not receive their card, that means they probably didn't get their form turned in or something happened to it. So definitely check on those. I remember someone said on our campus, oh, I did voter registration with this organization, but I never got my card. We realized they actually just never got registered to vote. So if somebody tells you like, oh, I registered to vote, but it's been 4 or 5 weeks, definitely check in and see if they actually got that voter registration done. And then reporting errors to the state if something's incorrect, if something was, they wrote in something incorrectly, like the address, or you see like party affiliation is wrong, making sure with those voter ID cards so you have the accurate information so you don't have any issues, especially going up to vote and then they're like, oh, you can't register, you can't actually vote today. If your voter registration application cannot be approved, you'll receive a letter from the county election board. So you'll know if you are not approved to register a vote for certain reasons. So then you can contact them and see if that was an error or not. And then accepted forms of ID in Oklahoma. So I kind of got confused with the question I was earlier. So these are for when you go actually to vote. You can use your voter ID card. You can use your driver's license, your Oklahoma state issued ID, federally recognized tribal ID card, passport, or OUID. A lot of students don't realize you can use your student OUID. I actually used mine when I put it in the primary, I guess a couple months ago. I was like, oh, here's my student ID card that I don't need anymore because I recently graduated, but it works. So you can use that as a form of identification when you're going to actually register to vote.
Cool. So the last thing that we want to do is make sure that you have a couple resources to take with you to give to your volunteers, and then to make sure that you have all the available information. So for our Oklahoma people, the OK Voter Portal is really important. So you can use this. This is what we're referring to when we talk about having a laptop at your table or at your event. Using this tool, you can confirm voter registration, find your polling place, view sample ballots, track your absentee ballot, update your party, update your address, as Destinee said, and that's only if you move within the same county. But this is really your one-stop shop if you're an Oklahoma voter, or if the student or staff or faculty member you're trying to register as an Oklahoma voter. It's a really important resource, and it's really helpful because they can do a lot of things and only have to remember like one URL. So this is a really awesome resource to have on hand. You can also feel free to print out this resource on like pieces of paper to hand out to people if that's something that you find a lot of people are needing at your events. You can play that by ear. Just make sure that they have access to this and know that it's available to them. So the other one, looks like our 5-minute warning. So this is a slide with a lot of resources that you can, I think we've given them access to the presentation, is that correct?
Yeah, I think the resources are in their like Google link that wants to, yeah.
Well, a lot of these will show up in that resource folder. You're welcome to snap a picture, email one of us. We'll flash those up on the screen at the end and we'll send this to you. However you can get it. And a lot of these have already been mentioned before. So just some really great resources for Oklahoma students. The Oklahoma State Election Board, which we all know and love. Vote.org is a really good resource to check your registration status if you have non-Oklahoma students. OK Policy is awesome. League of Women Voters is really reliable, really reliably nonpartisan. Oklahoma Watch, and then of course Oklahoma Votes. So we are no longer a part of Oklahoma Votes, but the new team for this year is really good, really excited. And I know that they're going to want to continue the work that they've started at the summit throughout this next year, and then hopefully for perpetuity. So we really want the Carl Albert Center, Oklahoma Votes, to be a really good resource for people who are organizing student voting on campuses in Oklahoma and then across the country. So please reach out if you have any questions, if you need copies of any of this information, and if you'd like some clarifications. Also, Lauren Schuler, who we all know and love now, is like an encyclopedia for voting information. So she would love to talk to you, I'm sure, about any questions you have, as well as the students that she oversees as part of Oklahoma Votes. Anything to add to that, Destinee?
No, I think, like I said, snapping a picture of the resources, but definitely talking to Lauren is a really great resource if you have, more additional questions after this presentation about voter registration, or reaching out to us. But we definitely really did. I think these resources are really great, and they're able to provide a really good landscape as we're moving into, this election cycle and trying to register as many students to vote.
Yeah, awesome. So I know that we ran up a little bit on our time. If there are any quick questions, we'd be happy to answer them now.
And you can shoot them in the chat box or anything like that.
Okay, otherwise, I'm gonna just feel free to jump in with questions whenever, message us, put them in the chat box. I'm gonna flash up this screen, which has our email addresses. So if you have any questions later on about the presentation or want to talk to us more about voter registration events, we know this is a really quick and fast introduction. So please reach out, and we'll be happy to hear from you about whatever feedback or questions that you have.
Yeah, but I think just the final thoughts is that voter registration can be a lot. It's a lot of information, and it's a lot of moving pieces to make it successful. But when it happens and when it gets done, like the numbers of how you see how many students you register to vote are really, really great. And seeing, what it does to, changing the climate on your campus is a powerful tool, especially this year. Coming into this election, a lot of people are looking more and recognizing I need to register to vote. So making sure you are having those conversations and being ready to, here's a form, you want to vote, talk about the election, here you go. But also educating at the same time that, it's not just our national elections that we're looking for, but they also trickle all the way down to our local politics. So, ensuring, telling people, thanks for registering to vote. Make sure you go, vote in the next election and in our local politics as well.
Thank you, everyone, for participating in our breakout session. It was really good to have you. Like Destinee said, this process can be so daunting for so many students, and being able to just give them everything they need to register to vote is really, really important, and is really important in this year when everything is a little bit more confusing and scary. So best of luck. We're really grateful for you for doing this work wherever you are, and we're so happy you could be here. I guess whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and jump back to the main session.